Welcome to our commission workshop. Today is Wednesday, April 5th. The time is now 6:07. Can we stand for Madam Clerk roll call?
Vice Mayor Irvin. Here. Commissioner Kelly,
Present.
Mayor Taylor,
Here.
and for the record, Commissioner Williams is joining virtually.
Okay, can we stand for the invocation? Followed by the pledge of allegiance.
Eternal God, our Father, we thank you for all of your many blessings. We thank you for life, health, and strength. Give us wisdom, knowledge, and understanding to those things which are pleasing in your sight. In Jesus' name we do pray. Amen.
Amen. The pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now we're gonna open up the floor for public comments on the agenda items only. Public comments is open. If you have a public comment, you can join to my left, your right. Seeing none, public comments are closed. We're going into our first discussion item, which is the tandem and mechanical parking. Mr. Manager, would you like to introduce this item?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just to give a bit of background on this workshop, we have two projects currently going through our community development department that one has mechanical parking and another employs tandem parking. Currently, our city ordinances are silent on both of these new types of parking. In order to proceed with both of these projects, I directed our community development director, Mr. Gregory Gay, to host a workshop so that we could hear from the commission on where they stand on both of these new forms of parking. And by way of background, that is the purpose of our meeting today. I'll now turn the floor over to our community development director, Mr. Gregory Gay.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners, and to the audience. Gregory Gay, the Director of Planning and Community Development. And I'm happy to present to you our findings as it relates to looking at the parking opportunities and creating new parking opportunities within our city. Many people have asked, why are you so concerned about parking? And when I was employed with another municipality, we had a commissioner that says parking pretty much drives whatever you want to do. If you don't have adequate parking, you pretty much are not going to be, your project may not end up being a success. And as a result of that, everyone's always concerned about the need for parking. No one really is concerned about parking until they can't find a parking space. And parking pretty much, as I said before, it drives what the need is for our particular project. So as it stands right now, our code speaks to surface parking and garage parking. And when you look at those two particular type of parking options from a development standpoint, it is a necessity, but there's a cost associated with that particular necessity. In most cases, we're looking at residential development, and in some cases, we're looking at commercial development. Residential development pretty much needs parking in order for people to store their cars on an overnight basis or for whatever particular use as necessary. And parking for single family home or duplexes can be pretty much simplistic. Our parking ratios for those particular uses are 1 to 1.5 per unit. And in most cases, when single family and duplex, you have over that particular ratio for the parking needs. But when we get into a situation where you have mixed use development or multifamily development parking, there comes the big concern as to what the parking number should be for those particular types of development coming online. Why is parking so important, and especially from a developer standpoint? Based on the research that we've been able to ascertain, parking is definitely a cost. In some cases, if you do surface parking, that cost can vary anywhere from $1,500 to $10,000 per space. So that's for every car that you need to park. It could be within that range. The average is about $5,000 per parking space if you're doing surface parking. So when you have a 30-unit development that requires 45 parking spaces, you can begin to add that up and determine what that cost would be for parking. And you have to make sure they have the right amount of land in order to accommodate that particular type of parking. Now, when you get into some of the larger developments, developments that may go more vertical, 4 stories or more, in most cases, you're going to be putting those particular type of parking in a garage format based on our code. And the price for structured parking or garage parking can vary anywhere from, an average is about $24,000 to $25,000 per space. So if you have a development that's 70 units and it requires 100 spaces, you're looking at putting in about $2.5 million right from the beginning, just to satisfy the parking requirements. And that's the parking requirements based on 1.5 parking spaces per unit, which is pretty much the average for most multifamily or mixed-use type developments. If you do underground parking, if that's something to be considered, because of our high water table, underground parking can be as high as $50,000 per space. So as you can see, the more involved with the development that parking is looked upon, the higher the price can go, especially for some of those developments where they may say, I have a height constraint and instead of going higher up, I may want to put my parking underground. Therefore, I have the ability to put more units going vertical. So that's something that we're looking, that's a concern as it relates to the cost for parking. Now, what we have been looking at, and this is not something that's new to other communities, but it's new to Opa-locka. We're looking at creating an option where people can meet those particular parking requirements. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're spending an exuberant amount of money. And in some cases, it's going to take up a very similar area or space within a development. So it could be a little bit more cost efficient. And that's when the options that we're looking at as it relates to tandem and mechanical. Now we have an example here to your left of what the tandem parking would be like. And basically tandem parking is you parking 2 cars within a parking space, one behind the other. In most situations where you have tandem parking, the parking is assigned, especially if it's in a residential development. So you have assigned parking that's pretty much dedicated to a unit or dedicated to a particular space. And you're not inconveniencing everybody within the complex. It's more or less whoever's in your household, whether it be your wife, your spouse, your significant other, your roommate. Those are the people that would be parking in those tandem spaces. So that would be something that you would have to coordinate on your own within your household as to moving those cars around in order to gain access and go wherever in whatever particular direction you need to go in. So we do have a project that has been proposed that is looking at tandem parking as one of their options. And that's basically putting all the parking on the first level. with their residential development going vertical. The other option that we're also considering to include as a part of the legislation is mechanical parking. Now, there's actually two versions. Well, actually, there's multiple versions as it relates to mechanical parking. The two that we're looking at are pretty much looking at either mechanical lifts or an automated system. Now, on the board to your right, at the top, you will see the top and the bottom, you will actually see an example of what a mechanical lift would look like. And it's very similar to the mechanical lifts that your automotive repair shops have. And basically you're raising one car above the other car, but instead of occupying an elongated parking space that might be 36 feet, you're actually occupying a parking space that's the same dimensions as a regular parking space, except one car is lifted over the other. That is also usually done within a assigned parking situation, but there are situations where, and especially from a commercial operation, where you would need to have some type of a valet service or someone who would have to operate those particular type of uses, especially on a commercial basis, to move the cars in and out as needed. The other option is the automated system. And the automated system is a parking service where in most cases, it does have to have an attendant or some type of valet to basically put in the codes in order to move those particular cars around and make them available when you want to leave your location where you are. There are some systems out there that can be utilized manually, where you put in a code and after a few minutes, the cars move around on conveyor belts and platforms, and then they bring the car out to a certain location where it can be driven out of the garage area, and then you can depart from there. Those are the two versions of mechanical. And we do have a project that is looking at the mechanical option from that particular perspective, and they are actually looking at it from an automated use. We are proposing these particular types of options to be placed into our code, because as it is right now, it's not something that can be done within our code. We need to have the information within our code in order to properly address it, make sure that it meets the parking requirements as it relates to projects within certain areas of the city. And as but for the most part, our parking ratios for our city, depending on the size of the development, for residential, you're looking at 1.5 parking spaces if you have a single bedroom, 2-bedroom, or a studio. If you get larger than that, the parking requirements go up to 2 per unit. And in most cases, you're looking at the parking ratio number being an average of those two particular types. We do have developments that are coming on board, coming online, that are using, have 2-bedroom, 2 baths, 3-bedroom, 2 baths. So it's going to be a mixture of that ratio between 1.5 and 2 in order to provide the parking, the minimum parking requirements for those particular developments. But for the most part, these are the options that we're looking at. One of the development teams did have a consultant that was coming. I don't know if he was able to get online because he did want to do a virtual presentation. So is he available? Not yet. Okay. All right. So I think I've explained for the most part the options that we're looking at. The consultant was going to come and basically make a much more extensive presentation as it relates to the automated mechanical parking operation, and just kind of give you a visual as to how it actually works, whether it be utilized by a single user or by a valet service. And as soon as we can get him hopefully online, we can go ahead and begin to see that presentation. But as it stands right now, these are the options that we are looking at as it relates to tandem parking and the mechanical parking. So if you have any questions, we'll try to address them as best we can at this time.
We're gonna open up the floor for questions. Any questions for Mr. Gay at this time?
Yes,
Vice Mayor?
good evening. Mr. Gay, you said that our code is 1.5 parking?
Yes.
What is, I've never
We-
seen a half a car, so I don't, get me to understand how that works for the benefit of the residents, 1.5 cars.
What it is, what that ratio number does is taking an average within the development. And for most developments, for most multifamily developments, whether it be a rental or a condominium, when you get that particular unit, you're guaranteed one parking space. If you need an additional parking space, you have an option to either purchase or lease that additional parking space. So there are some people that don't need a car at all. They don't have a car. They live in a development. They take public transportation. And so they don't really need to utilize that space. They may lease that space out to another individual who requires additional parking. But when you do the average of the numbers, in most cases, it's somewhere between 1.5 to 2 as it relates to the parking ratio. And that's because you have a mixture of units within the development.
I understand that. I also understand that in our city, we have a problem with parking for these residents. And I was just wondering how 1.5 became available opposed to 2 cars, 1 car, 2 car.
Well, the 1.5 is like a national standard for parking requirements, and we pretty much follow that same standard. Most cities that I'm aware of don't go beyond 2
Okay.
parking spaces per unit.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Mr. Gay at this moment?
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Manager, that was you?
Yes, I'd just like to add to the conversation that Vice Mayor was having with Mr. Gay. Just by point of reference, and this is a area that has been a concern of all of ours. The Town Center 1 Senior Housing Project, I believe, has a 0.6 ratio for parking, which was allowed and permitted, but as you can see, it's been problematic. So it is the recommendation of administration that we never make allowances that would be below a 0.1, a 1.0, and that we seek to at least maintain our 1.5.
And if I could just piggyback off of that statement, when the code was written to allow that particular 0.6, it pretty much was addressing senior housing specifically. And the way it was written, it was that for every 2 units within a senior housing development or an elderly housing development, only 1 parking space would be needed. And that was specifically written within the transit-oriented development district at that time. When I came on board, we did change that to make it where we would not have parking below a ratio of 1. And that has been our standard since that time.
Commissioner Williams is online and she has a question. Commissioner Williams?
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Am I
Yes,
We can.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, Mr. Gay, quick question. For the parking, specifically the mechanical parking, that, goes up in pretty high cost, the automated, the lifts, and, we're talking up to $10,000, and then the automated 20,000. My question is, do the developers tend to offset that cost by raising the price of the units? Or do they eat that cost themselves in your research?
Well, based on my research, and thank you for that question, Commissioner Williams. Based on my research, developers are basically in the game to make money. And whatever particular cost that can be passed on to that end user is usually done so in some way, shape, or form, whether it be for a rental project or whether it be for a home ownership project. Home ownership, it might be a little bit different, as that is a cost that might be something that will be bared upon with the condo association or the homeowners association as a long-term use. But that is something that is usually, as we look at these particular types of parking options, the initial cost is bared by the developer. So if they're going to build a garage and the garage is going to cost $2.5 million, that's going to be included in the cost of the overall development. If they have another option that's going to be a little bit more efficient in terms of costs, they can look at those particular options as well. The cheapest version is surface parking. And surface parking is on an average of $5,000 per parking space. So that is the cheapest option for allowing parking within the development. Taking into consideration that you have enough land mass in order to do all surface parking within the development.
Okay,
Williams, are you-
so thank you, Mr. Gay, for the answer. And I don't know if you can get this information, and I guess possibly that would be some further research. What could be, so if we're saying, and I guess you're looking at cities nearby, and I know for a fact there are some cities near us, Wynwood to be exact, that have mechanical and automated parking. Are we looking at a price increase, okay, I'm so sorry, not us, but the renter? Is the renter looking at a price increase of 500? And I know it would all be a guesstimate. Would the renter be looking at a price increase of 1,000, which then will create our city, if we go with, let's say, the highest, the mechanical one, I know there's 3 tiers, so the highest tier, the platinum parking, basically. If we go with platinum parking, then do we now price our residents out of being able to move into or live in our own city, where now we're talking about workforce housing, affordable housing, and now that's a price out? So is there a way in terms of, and I know we can't direct the contractors and we can't, tell them what we would expect, but how do we then ensure that we're not overpricing people that are trying to actually live in our city? Is there a way we can do that?
Commissioner Williams, that's also an excellent question. When it comes to affordable housing, I would say probably in most cases, those particular type of housing developments are subsidized in some way, shape, or form. There could be some subsidies that will pick up that cost as it relates to the parking, at least from the initial development standpoint. But is there a way to guarantee it? I don't believe that from the city side, that's not something that we can pretty much regulate. And it's really up to the development team and their designers to determine which type of parking would be the best parking suited for them. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have to go toward the mechanical use. They could do the tandem use. And as I had expressed in my presentation, even if you looked at the simple mechanical use where you're using lifts, the lifts vary anywhere from $3,000 to $10,000 per lift. But for the most part, the average price is between 5 and 6, which is pretty much very close to what the cost would be for just having surface parking. So you're literally doubling the cost for surface parking, but you're being able to double the amount of cars being parked within that development. The mechanical one is when you really are looking into more of a mixed use or a multifamily development that's probably higher than 5 stories, going up to our 8-story maximum. And if it's on a very tight site, it's probably going to be the best option to maximize the number of cars that will be parked at that particular development in order to meet the minimum parking requirements.
Commissioner Williams, Was-
Thank you, Mr. Gay. I'm done. Thank you so much.
okay, Commissioner Kelly?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let me begin by just saying, so for the record, I brought up about transit-oriented before, and I do plan to bring back legislation to tweak that, because I think that's one of the challenges we have in this city with that ratio of 35% for the transit-oriented that we need to look at. And that's how you got that development over there on Fisherman, partly because the idea was people are not going to get in a car, they're going to take mass public transportation, and that has not occurred and probably will not occur. So let me just put that out there first. As it relates to the parking proposals or whatever that you're bringing, how long has the city been looking at this?
We've been looking at this particular option for a little more than a year now.
Okay, I bring it up because one of my colleagues, particularly Bishop Williams, had mentioned in the last meeting about the challenge with parking, and we hadn't seen any kind of recommendations. So you've been working on it for a year.
Yes, we have.
Okay.
We had actually hoped to have this before
I
you
just
prior
got
to
this,
this
and
date.
you all know I don't like to get stuff last minute to be able to go over it in detail. So I'm going to reserve my questions very lightly. But one thing I do want to ask, since it was kind of given to you in that light, most of these mechanical and tandem are usually assigned valet or code. Some kind of code.
Yes.
So based on your experience, my colleague used that term, which one have you seen most of in cities comparable to our size?
In terms of cities comparable to our size, a lot of them are in the same position that we are in looking at these particular options. The tandem and mechanical pretty much derived from some of our larger urban spaces that are nearby. I know that North Miami has been considering that particular tandem and mechanical parking for their multifamily use.
Well,
and then
I
some of
know
the
they
others.
have New York, Philadelphia, a lot of them have, but it's still a work in progress. I say that because one of the things that's occurring even now with a lot of our apartment complexes where you can, as you say, lease the spot, get extra parking spot, they're not doing that. They're not doing that. That's why you see cars parked all over the place. So my question really would be, what you're proposing or in legislation, I would assume, would be something that would force developers, owners, and tenants to use that availability inside those units as opposed to what occurs now. And there are places right now in the city where you can, as a part of your rent and your lease, get a parking space or two. Well, as you said, a lot of them may get one, but they got 3 cars. So guess what are those 2 cars at? They're outside somewhere. So how would you propose enforcing that, since you said you're proposing to bring legislation regarding it?
Well, part of that will have to be through the management of the properties itself. In most parking situations, management makes a determination of how the parking is available. They make the determination whether you can lease an additional parking space, and yet and it's usually through the management office or either through the condo association. They make that particular determination of what particular spaces may be available for lease or for purchase in ownership situations. So that's really something that has to be on the management side. We can have language within our ordinance that will, in essence, require the management companies to do such and to make sure that whatever particular parking requirements that a potential renter or a potential property owner is coming in with, that to make sure that they know they have to make those particular accommodations in order to have the proper parking. And if they can't do that, then maybe that property is not for them. I've even heard of situations where people have basically either sold their car because they didn't want to deal with the parking situation, or they took it to somebody else's house and
Did
they,
you just say sold their car?
yes, sold their car.
Okay, Mr.
Yes. I do know the situation where a person who had a parking situation, he said, I'm in an urban situation where I don't need a car anymore. And they take public transportation. They sold their car,
Okay. All right.
which is what ultimately, this transit oriented development is supposed to be moving toward, is to get people out of their cars and onto public transportation.
I totally agree. I understand it, but here we are years later, and that's not happening in South Florida. Washington, other urban areas where it's happening. South Florida, we'll get all of public transportation. We'll ride tri-rail, but at the end of the day, we're gonna get in our vehicles, and not just one vehicle, but 2 or 3 vehicles. But I'll listen to the rest of the presentation, and of course, I will follow with more questions later. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
No problem. Commissioner Kelly. All right, Mr. Gate, let's throw you a lifeline real quick. Most of us up here live in single family homes, which means our parking is free for all. And I think I'm probably the only one that live in a gated community where we have to register yes. Opa-locka has a
Mr.
gated
Mayor.
community.
20% of my church live in gated rental.
But you have to register your car is what my point. You have to register your car. So, and in my complex, for example, I'm saying that for Vice Mayor, y'all. We allowed it 2 parking spots per car. Now you can get another car, but you won't have parking. And in our complex, if you don't register the car cannot be parked in the complex, which is the reason why you have parking along the 17th Avenue when they put up all them signs that say no parking. So there's no way for the developer does their job in this sense by this is the amount of parking spots I'm giving you. You have 1 parking spot per house, or you have 2 parking spots per house. If you need additional parking, you can park it anywhere you want to, but you can't park it here. So that will have to come on the city side, where we have to now try to figure out how we're going to enforce parking on our right of ways or on our swells, which is what we see here. Because that was never meant to, when I look back, was never meant to have cars like that. But here we are, like Commissioner Kelly said, years later, younger people are moving in, younger people, I don't want to catch the bus, I don't want to catch the train, I want a car. So that's why you have that situation. So but go ahead, Commissioner Kelly.
Well, let me just interject. First of all, you had a certain percentage that wasn't elderly that factored into the transportation. And then the elderly folks that were there still didn't want to give their cars either. And whoever did the analysis was thinking they're not going to use their cars. They didn't give them up. They kept their cars, but you also had the other, 10% that was allowed based on economics and because the way they got their funding. subsidized, whatever. So
10%
all
of the
locals just have
residents
2 or 3
could be
cars.
under the age of
Right.
55.
See, but I understand what you're saying, Mr. Mayor, because I have a percentage of my members that live the same situation, but they can't even afford the second car, let alone the one car. Most times you do get one,
You get one.
but they can't afford the second one, so they're still trying to park or find somewhere to park. So I understand that fully, what you're referencing. But in terms of that development there, the idea was everybody's gonna stop driving. That was not gonna occur even with seniors. So,
Well, I will say, I'm familiar with both parking structures, the tandem parking, as well as the mechanical parking. And I know this has nothing to do with residential, but I know most cities with parking problems are thriving cities. So though we don't want a parking problem in Opa-locka. Vice Mayor cut our eyes at me when I said that. But I like the route which you're going. So if this is a step in that direction, I'm here for it. I'm here for it. But to Commissioner Kelly's point, we also have to consider the other issues, which is people parking where they feel like it in our city.
well, Mr. Mayor, the real challenge is not, I mean, I've seen this in the different places. It works certain places where people are not going to drive. First of all, you're gonna have to, like you say, get folks out of their cars, which is a challenge for South Florida, period. But the second thing is, way I look at it, once the developers, whoever builds it, it's gonna be incumbent upon us. We're gonna become the heavy. Because I can offer you one space guaranteed, you can get another one. I'm not gonna buy the second one. I'm not gonna lease the other one. I'm gonna go outside of that. So now it's on the city with the headache of the parking everywhere. It's not really on the developer. You got to address this on the front end with them. And like Mr. Gay said, developers, it's understandable, they're trying to maximize whatever they're doing. But the challenge is, and my key, I like the valet. I kind of like that. Y'all got
Okay.
valet over there with you?
No, we got valet though.
Y'all got
We don't have valet.
I mean, you got valet, but or cold. So,
I'm moving here with the valet though. They got valet. I'm gonna move out.
well, I guess it's a work in progress. But I think it's gonna be heavy on the city.
That's what my point is. The city has to now attack it.
And if I could speak to that, some years ago, within the downtown area, and I think Commissioner Kelly, you were here at the time, one of the things that you asked for was to find out how much parking can be created within our downtown area. And we kind of looked at that as a part of our exercise to basically get a good determination as to what parking existed within our downtown. And from that analysis, I'm just going to go over it real quickly. We actually have about six locations that allow for public parking, which totals out to about 469 parking spaces just for the public parking. Now, out of those six, actually 2 of them have not been fully developed. So they're just vacant lots right now. One is the vacant lot adjacent to Siegel Park, right behind the Vice Mayor's home. That lot right there is supposed to be utilized for
Shabandi.
parking. Shabandi, correct. That parking area is supposed to be utilized for parking for Shabandi Community Center. And 80 to 100 parking spaces is supposed to be created there. Another location is, and I kind of count this, but I really shouldn't, is the State of Florida parking lot across the street. Out of the 213 parking spaces that are on that property, 88 are dedicated to public use. So people who are going to the state office or any offices downtown come to our office, they utilize that parking. And as far as on street, we have approximately, and that's along Opa-locka Boulevard or on Purvis or on Aladdin. We actually have right now 131 parking spaces that's already been developed. Now, there are additional areas along On Street specifically where additional parking can be provided. And then there are some private parking lots that could also be factored in to that parking count. So when we did our analysis overall, we were looking at just under 1,000 parking spaces between what's existing and what could be developed to support the parking needs within our downtown area.
Mr. Mayor,
Vice Mayor.
Mr. Gay? You got to walk me through that physically, because I don't think that's true. I don't see it. Even the parking lot behind my house, you say 80 to 100 cars.
Yes.
Is that with the mechanical we're talking,
No.
or just,
That's surface parking.
I don't believe that. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
And I'm on Opa-locka Boulevard every day, and there's 2 parking lots, which is, I don't know where I am inside, but there's 2 parking lots, and then on the street from the railroad track to past my office, there's maybe 8. You pushing it to get 10. There's 2 in my front of my office. There's two, maybe 3 across the street where Miss Russell used to rent. There's 2 there. And that's it. That's it. When you get, that's it.
Well, when I'm saying about Opa-locka Boulevard, I'm actually going from approximately West Avenue all the way to Historic City Hall. So it's that full stretch, not just up to the railroad track.
Okay, I'm
Mr.
gonna let you
Mayor,
have that. I'm not gonna let you have that.
Madam,
The-
you done? Madam Attorney?
yes, if I may just add a couple of comments here to some of the questions and discussion that has taken place so far. And I don't want to get ahead of Mr. Gay. I know he still has a presentation on the transit-oriented development. But some of the things that can be done if that part of the code remains or before those changes come back for a vote officially. When you come forward with the development agreement, you can put conditions in there. For the site plan, you can put conditions in that site plan regarding posting the property, having signs out there, having code compliance towed. That seems like a big issue. I'm not familiar with the project that you're speaking of, Mr. Williams, but there are some other things you can do going forward to try to address the parking concern if these reductions in parkings are provided. I'm happy to see that it's no longer 0.6, but it's certainly room to take a look at what's existing in the code, the percentages that are there for parking requirements, and change those. And another comment on some of those parking requirements is for affordable housing. Most communities want to encourage affordable housing. Most developers aren't building it. So that has been looked at as an incentive for those developers to come in to maintain their costs, is to reduce the costs they would have to pay in parking. So as Mr. Gay in his presentation said, a spot is $10,000. If they don't have to spend that $10,000, what they present to most jurisdictions is they can put that money into homes or reduce the cost of the rent for those units. So that's a cost saving measure for developers, is why some of this was created in the first place. But we can certainly look at those numbers if it's creating a parking issue for the city and adjust them and come back with those changes in the code so that it's not a burden on the neighborhood.
Let me just, I like, Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry.
Commissioner,
I like your comments, but here's the challenge I have with that. By the time we get to developers agreements, it's so late in the ballgame until it's very unfair to developers and the city. That's why you got to address this way before you get to that point, because we developers, everything has really been done. You're kind of fine tuning and putting things in that probably will not be challenging. This, what I see dealing with some of this is going to be challenging because it's going to make the city the heavy, even with the code compliance and things. So I'd rather be addressed early on before people get down the road of investing the money. I do know, like you said, affordable housing, there is incentive, but at the same time, once I build it, you know, what usually occurs, I put a property manager in there and the owners, whatever, absentee, you can't find them. And now the city is being the heavy. That's why I made that statement. So if we're going to look at it, just like with the transit oriented, tweaking that, because that to me is going to be a headache. That's already a headache, is going to be even more because people look at that, come in, take advantage of that percentage or that reduction. What's the term Mr. Gay likes to use? To assist them to make it work. But in the end, it's the city that winds up with the headache over the long haul. So I look forward to catching it early as opposed to late. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
No problem.
Mr. Mayor, we do have the consultant online. So if
Okay.
you would like to, at whatever point in time you will want to have the presentation.
We can let them make the presentation, but we also got to move on.
Yeah, let me just
Commissioner
make a
Bass
comment.
wants to say something, but we are.
Mr.
we'll-
Gay, I am pleased to see that there are things in the works to better parking in the city of Opa-locka. And I'm sure I can speak for all of my colleagues. It's horrible. My street, literally, I have to, and this residential, I have to slow down for a car to pass. That's how many cars that literally park on my street. Matter of fact, one of my neighbors has 6 cars. So it is crazy. And we talk about beautification. Parking for me is a part of beautification. If we want our city to be inviting to upper class, middle class people, we need to do something to make sure that that happens. And I'm all for the tandem parking or even the mechanical parking, because to me, parking for the most part is almost a sore eye to me. And I would like to see some of those cars off the street. I know that we need to have affordable housing. We're all for it because everybody's not, cashy or bankroll like everyone else. But I think this is something that we really do need to look into to get some of those cars off our streets. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Gay, we're gonna let,
Yes, we have Mr. Bellison, who is a part of the development team. He has a presentation. He's going to be coming on virtually to make that presentation at this time.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Yes, we can hear
Okay,
you.
perfect. So yes, I am the parking equipment supplier for Armstrong Building and others, many others. So let me give you a brief history of myself. I've actually been in the automated and mechanical parking industry for 28 years. I was the vice president of automation or automated parking for a company called Park Plus. You've probably heard of them previously. I have partnerships with many different people and have invented many different machines. And literally there's probably 2 million spaces worldwide of my systems that are installed. One of the systems that we're talking about right here is it's a system that's known by various names. However, if I can share screen here, I'm going to share a screen that is, can you see the screen right here?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so this is a system that we've done as Park Plus, but this system is called a lift slide. It's what Park Plus calls it, as a lift slide. This is the type of system. If you look at the system, you can go vertically in one row. Now, this system here is showing that there's 6 vehicles wide, 1, 2, 3 on each side of the center beam. However, you can go as small as 2 spaces wide or as many as 14 spaces wide we've done. And I can show you many different locations. And as a matter of fact, I'll show you a location in the next video that we did in Collins Avenue. What you can do with this, you can have above, so this is grade right here, and you have a barrier that stops people from getting in there. This is within the building's footprint itself, and I'll show you the building footprint in a moment here and what we're talking about. But just so that you're able to understand those drawings when we get to that point. This is the ground level right here with these gates. You can go as high as 17 levels high. And these levels can vary on their height, depending on if you want to put SUVs in there or if you want to put regular sedans in there. So they're variable height. They are, once they're set and the system is set up this way, they only are able to handle that height vehicle in that space and in that row. Now, there's an empty space or an empty column down to the ground floor that's here. And this, what it does is it allows all of these vehicles to move side to side. And you'll see it in the movie here. The top has a vehicle in every single space. Now, when you come up, there's no valet that's needed here. We have these running in Hoboken, we have them running all over China, we have them running in Mexico, we have them literally running in Collins Avenue, everywhere in the world. With this, what we do is the individual comes in, they park their vehicle, they're able to walk out, and you can also do spaces underground. Now, this just gives an opportunity for additional spaces and everything else to where you don't have to go higher with your parking print. But whoever the vehicle is can actually retrieve their vehicle by themselves. There's no valet, there's no anything else required. And with the vehicle, they'll actually have a clicker. And that clicker gives them access to that one space that they are, or that's associated with that. Now, there is another, here's the system in one second, I am pulling that up. Oh, here we are. I have to share again, sorry. Please excuse me. Okay, can you see this system here? Can you see my screen here?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so this is over at 6080 Collins Avenue. So this is right in southern Florida. This is much closer to the sea spray and everything else than you guys are. But it stands up no problem to salt air, has no issues with any of that. Now, if it was in direct contact with salt air, that's a whole nother thing, but you guys are so far from the beach, it's not really a thing. But this is actually over in Collins Avenue currently. And the individual can actually park their own car, and without having a remote, what they do is they run up to the space. And sorry, it showed right here, you actually just enter in your key or your code for your parking space. With that code, it retrieves your car. Now, these retrievals, we typically get them to where they are 30 seconds to 1 minute maximum retrieval. Now, the way that I would suggest that we do the project, and this is what we have, I'm going to share my entire screen. The way that I suggest that we do is this is the ground floor right here. With actually, let me get into an AutoCAD. It might be easier for you. So here is the entrance coming in for the project. As you drive into the entrance, you come in and you can back up into the space. That way you can pull out quickly or easily. It's easier for people to pull out than it is to, and it's easier to back in than it is to back out and pull in. It's just human nature. We've learned this over so many, literally a couple million spaces. With this, there will be individual space or individual systems. This would be an individual system, these four. So there would be a empty column here. Same thing over here. You'd have an empty, these bottom four would also be another system. Here in these center four, you'd have another system. In these upper four on the back left, you would have a separate system, and then the back right would be a separate system. This allows you to have 5 transactions going at any given time. And if all of them, you have a rush in the morning where people want their vehicles, they come here and they key in their space, you have 5 vehicles that can go out every minute. If we look at a side view of the spaces, the side view of the spaces, the wheels of the vehicles actually sit on the machinery on a tray. And so the wheels sit here on this tray, and there's hooks to make sure if there's hurricanes or anything else, let's say there's a chain that breaks or a cable that breaks or anything else, the system has redundant safety features. These safety features ensure that there's no vehicle that's crashing into another one. All of these interlocks make sure that everything is okay. And the vehicles themselves can occupy the space from on top of the tray to the bottom of the next tray. Now, the way that they slide side to side allows for, literally, like I was saying, no valet necessary. These, we can train someone to drive, and they're able to park their own vehicle every time. Now, I do apologize, my dog in the background. This is just an oversimplified version of what it is, but the vehicles on the bottom shift side to side and up and down. The vehicles on the top row can only go down. Now, what this does is it allows us to build in supports for the building as well. And those supports for the building are able to make it to where the column grid is supported for better hurricane code, etc. We also can clad the outside, which here, these would be inside the building, but in other areas we've done cladding for the spaces. And I'll go through this real quick. So this is just kind of a quick overview, if you will, if you're looking at a side view of it. Does this make sense? Does anybody have any questions so far?
No, go ahead, keep going.
Okay. Also, so this, for example, if you have a 5 wide, you have 5 across the top, but all of the other layers only have 4, so that you have a jockey column of spaces where we can do it. So let's say you want to move this vehicle here. You would move both of these columns out of the way and these 3 vehicles out of the way as well. And it doesn't require each vehicle to move separately. One column will move and the other column will start immediately after that as soon as it's cleared. The entire thing is controlled by a PLC, and that takes care of that. So it is bulletproof with all of this. Now, the safeties as well, just one other thing for the safeties. This is something we've had to do over in Oxnard, California. With the safety, what we've done is we actually have safeties that are built into the back of each space here. And it's just a planar laser. We can see if someone's in there, etc. And the system doesn't clear or allow movement when it's unsafe. So we have backups and safeties built into those. It's something that is readily available. It's something that we do literally all over the world and I've done for decades. There are other products. I'm just going to throw in a quick plug as well for other products that we might look at in the future, because I didn't know you had a problem, an opportunity, let's put it that way, with your streets. This is another system that we do. And it's the same thing that you have. There's problem with cars parking on the roads. And this is just real quick. The cars are parking on the roads. We can actually take all of the parking off the roads and put them in a mechanical system over the road. And this will be something for a future time, but I just had no idea that you guys were even looking for that. But it's something that it's something that we have beautified the space. You can actually create a park on top. You can create restaurants on top. You can do many different things. And it also allows the individuals to buy a permit or a pass, and they have to park above this. Now, the greatest thing about this system is that it frees up an entirely other lane of traffic. And it doesn't block the lane of traffic as people are coming into the parking system. So this is just for the future, but I just overheard you talking about issues with parking on the street and having lots of people and not sure what to do and everything else. So there's different options that we can look at as well. But right now, the main project obviously is with the Armstrong building, but I open the floor back up to you.
Thank you,
Uh,
Mr. Mayor.
Do we have any questions? But Vice Mayor's excited about the on-street parking with the little lifts and stuff. Any questions for our guests on tonight?
Mr. Mayor,
Commissioner Kelly?
I don't have a question. I just want to get a copy of the presentation with all of that. We can get that, Mr. Gay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, Mr. Gay, if all hearts and minds are clear, we have to wrap this meeting up because we have to go into another discussion. So is there anything else as it relates to tandem parking and mechanical?
Nothing else in relationship to tandem and mechanical parking. I know we did touch on the TOD, and we have made modifications to the language as relates to the TOD. And even within the recently passed Opa-locka downtown master plan, it makes reference to TOD parking being at a minimum of 1.25 to allow for some sense of reduction, but nothing going below 1. But that's something that we can continue to further study and see what that number should actually be as we look at making modifications to our TOD language.
Okay. All righty.
That concludes.
All right, if there's nothing else further on this topic, we're gonna go to our next discussion item, which is the operational audit presentation. Mr. Manager, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we have, as you all are aware, our operational audit back from 2016 that looks at how the city operates and made recommendations some time ago on things that they wanted to see the city of Opa-locka implement to improve its organizational structure and operations. These have been findings for a long period of time. that began to be addressed under the previous administration, the paid administration, with some success. We have piggybacked off of that success to push this forward to conclusion of the 99 findings. We responded to all of them, moving 19 of them in March to fully corrected and 54 of them to partially corrected. We are now looking at our main focus on this response was the 15 remaining not corrected items, and 11 of the items are no occasion to correct, which means that there was a finding, but nothing has happened for the city to demonstrate that it has the ability to correct it. Many of these items I will be coming to you to request a special commission meeting to pass resolutions to address them, and also ordinances as recommended by the state. Just to give you to reiterate the excitement that the state has over our success. They do not anticipate coming back many more times to the city of Opa-locka, as they are very, very excited and pleased with the progress that we have made, and stated so on the record. So we're very, very excited to have that kind of endorsement on the progress that we have presented to them. I will be going through, and you have your booklet in front of you. I will be going through the items so that the commission is informed and has the opportunity to ask any questions. Focus, of course, being on the partially corrected items and the not corrected items, but I will also cover as quickly as possible the corrected items so that you're aware, and if time permits, the no occasion to correct. So are there any questions before I get started?
Just one. I don't think I heard you correctly when you mentioned the no occasion to correct. You said that means what?
The no occasion to correct means that it was a finding, say perhaps that they found that the city improperly appropriated a good. But we did have an opportunity. We may put some policies and procedures in place so that that doesn't happen again, but we didn't appropriate that good again, so it hasn't happened. Like for one was a real estate transaction. We haven't done a real estate transaction similar to the one that was a finding, so there's no opportunity for us to demonstrate that we corrected it. Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Bass. So we're just going to jump right in here. I'll be as explanatory as I possibly can so the audience can also participate should there be a need. Our first finding that was partially corrected was finding number 3, which was our general fund reserve requirement. The city has implemented new fund balance policies as of fiscal year 2021 under the previous administration, consistent with governmental finance officer association best practices. These are standards that are promulgated by the government that we are implementing throughout our finance department and our systems. We are going to be recommending legislation be prepared to update the city code of ordinances to reflect the recognized best practices policies the city has implemented. That's not only GFOA, but GOA as well. On this basis, this finding will be considered to be corrected, and we will be bringing that resolution in a special commission meeting. Any questions from the commission? Moving on to the next finding. This is again a partially corrected. Finding number 4 was enterprise working capital reserve requirement. This is pretty much regarding the stormwater fund as reflected in our working capital reserves. Consistent with code requirements, it's supposed to be a restricted fund. The recommendation was to implement a new working capital reserve policy as of fiscal 2021, consistent again with GFOA practices. And that is going to be something that you hear me say consistently. One of the challenges that the city has in our finance department is that many things just were not done to the governmental best practices standard. And we'll get cited for that a lot here in our operational audit. So we can now consider that corrected as the city is preparing legislation to update the city code of ordinances to again reflect the recognized best practices policies that the city has already implemented. And I'd also like to acknowledge our new finance director, Mrs. Naima Walker, who has been instrumental in promulgating that and putting that forward. Yeah. Additionally, the commission authorized staff to issue an RFP for utility rate study. That was brought just a few months ago as we identified this as an issue and brought it before you to kind of get ahead of this audit. Staff previously moved the stormwater fees to the property tax bill, ensuring that all properties paid their fair share, which brought the stormwater fund working capital reserves up to an acceptable level. When I came on board as your interim city manager in April of last year, I identified that we had some severe deficiencies in our water and sewer fund and also our stormwater fund. Making this change has made our water and sewer, our stormwater fund healthy. And we're looking to, as we balance out some of our due froms, to also address some of the issues in our water and sewer fund. I'll open the floor up to the commissioners for any questions on this finding. Moving on to finding number 11 is our budgetary process. There were several issues with our budgetary process that resulted in discrepancies between what the commission approved in fiscal 2020 budget and what the budget actually reflected. So finance being the strong suit of this administration with a very strong finance director, a very strong budget administrator, Mr. Robert Anathan. This is something that we attacked head on. And we looked at how the city had begun to provide its updates to the state. So we now provide monthly budgetary updates to the state that looks at our numbers. We go over our numbers internally before we submit them, and then we have a date which we go over them with the state. We do consider this finding now to be corrected. Our current practice is to update the city finance system once a budget amendment has been approved by the state and the city commission. The city continues to catch up on its accounting as reflected by the target to complete the fiscal 2022 audit by December of this year. The city has upgraded its monthly financial reporting, as I stated. Budget amendments are now posted on the city website within 24 hours of a receipt for full transparency. And the state now receives monthly financial statements within 10 days after the end of each month. These are all systems and balances and checks that have been implemented under the current administration and held by our current budget administrator, Mr. Robert Anathan. I open the floor up to the commission if you have any questions on this finding.
Mr. Mayor,
Commissioner Kelly?
my mic can't hardly hear. I need to go back to the previous one on the number 4 and just get a clarity. Since this is deemed corrected, with the updating of the code, I got that.
Mhm.
But the commitment to the update is utilities. So we're basically saying to the state that whatever comes back with those rate structures, we're going to implement.
No, sir. There's no connection between the two.
So we wouldn't have to implement them. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I don't see how we're not going to have to deal with that when it's part of why we're doing the rate studies is because our rate structure is antiquated and outdated.
Absolutely, you're 100%. What I understood you to say is that whatever the state recommends, we have to implement.
No. I didn't say whatever the state recommends. What I'm saying, we're saying to the state, we're doing this rate study, and whatever comes back with rate study, we're going to follow it if it requires us to adjust those rates. That's what I'm asking.
That will be the recommendation of this administration. Just to give further background to what Commissioner Kelly's talking about, we're required to do rate studies on consistent basis. Unfortunately, a rate study has not been done since 2016. It appears to be one of those items that each administration has just kind of kicked down the road and have never gotten done. And of course, that's something that could be uncomfortable. So even with this current administration, as last year was an election year, we decided to postpone bringing that before the dais for them to have vote on it. But we are now moving forward with that as that's something that should have been done since 2016. So that once that rate study is completed, we will bring back that to the commission to make decisions on and vote on getting it implemented. And we do believe that that will be the final step or an additional step to get our water and sewer fund back healthy again. As Commissioner Kelly stated, those are very antiquated rates that we have right now, and they're really unable to sustain operations on a long-term basis.
Okay, correct. I just want us to be very aware of what that really means when it comes back, because we're basically saying to the state, we recognize that we're going to address it. So when it's time to address it, Gonna have to address it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to put that, be clear on that for that one. Thank you.
Okay,
Mr. Mayor, just a quick question.
Commissioner Bass?
How often should we be doing a rate study?
That is a recommendation that comes from our Public Works Department based on the health of our systems. We're still implementing a lot, so we don't have a regular repairs to our operations and our public rec system. So we currently don't have a schedule, but the recommended is at least once every 5 years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Manager.
All right, moving on, Mr. Mayor. Was there any question on finding number 11, which is looking at the budgetary process? Moving on to finding 12, which is administrative costs. This was one of the items that was no occasion to correct, where we just didn't allocate administrative costs to the enterprise funds through fiscal year 2020. We believe we put systems in place so that never happens again, but don't have an opportunity to demonstrate that it's been corrected. Moving on to finding, are there any questions regarding that item? Moving on to finding number 13, law enforcement revenue sharing. This is a pretty technical issue, and you'll find a lot of these issues are somewhat technical to finance and budgetary processes. That's because, as again, we weren't following general accounting principles on a regular and consistent basis throughout the administration. Here it was DOJ annual forms not filed timely and single audit requirements not completed timely. We've implemented a lot of policies and procedures with the submission of the fiscal 2022 annual audit, including the federal single audit in December 2023. The city will be in compliance with the recommendations of this finding. Since the city now has a history of completing the DOJ annual forms and federal single audit as part of the audit processes, the policy procedures associated with this finding, the administration deems this corrected. Any questions regarding this item? Next is a pretty technical one again, looking at our fuel taxes. The state continues to recommend that the city establish separate accountability for fuel tax revenues and expenditures by using separate special revenue funds in accordance with the FDFS manual. This is fully corrected. And again, I'd like to acknowledge our finance director for taking this head on for the city. Revenue and expenditure appropriations will be supported with a special revenue fund in accordance with the FDFS manual. Restricted fund reconciliation is a task to be assigned to accounting staff, personnel who can maintain the activities of these dollars. And so that the commission is fully apprised of some of our financial challenges. We were looking at a hole of about $50 million that we just have been struggling to determine how to correct. And I understand it's been an issue that's been kicked down the road for many administrations, but in order to be able to complete these audits, we're going to be caught up. So there's no more years that we can pass it down. So we are now looking at what we call these due froms. And that is where you may have a situation where a previous administration didn't have enough money in the general fund to cover payroll. There are a couple of instances where in the past, the city didn't have the money to cover payroll or to cover health insurance. And we pulled money from restricted accounts, say the storm water fund, water and sewer fund, and never paid that back. When you pull money from a restricted fund, it has to be returned. And many times we didn't even have a record of the transaction. So we're trying to figure out why this money is not there and where did the money go to? And it's been quite a challenge. And there has been significant work done on the previous contractor, and we've just got to get it done now. So it's all hands on decks for us to correct this. We've now got that due from balance from about $50 million to $27 million, and we hope to have it cleared by the end of the year. Any questions returning to this finding? Fantastic. Moving on to finding 20, fund accounting and expenditure coding.
Commissioner Kelly?
Thank
Mr.
you.
Manager.
All of that you just said was related to the fuel tax, and finding number 16, where the revenues were used for other purposes. All of that was related to just the fuel tax?
That is the general umbrella, correct? Because the fuel tax is a restricted fund that was utilized to fund other activities.
So that was used to pay salaries?
No, not specifically to salaries. There were instances where salaries were paid from restricted accounts. On that previous instance, it was water and sewer fund.
But not fuel tax.
No, the fuel tax was
Okay.
just used for
All right, so
miscellaneous
you kind
expenditures.
of making a general statement off of one specific. Okay, I got you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
No problem. Ms. Manager.
Okay. Finding 20, fund accounting and expenditure coding. They deemed this partially corrected. We now consider this fully corrected. They recommended that the city continue efforts to ensure financial transactions are properly accounted for in city accounting records and enhance procedures to address training for applicable city employees. We've done that. Finance has developed an administrative policy and procedure for management of journal entries and conducted a training session with staff to review. We consider this fully corrected. If there's no questions, I'll move on to finding 22, bank account reconciliations, which is also a major challenge for the city with the management of its finances. They deemed this partially corrected from our previous submission and continue to recommend that we extend efforts to ensure that timely bank account reconciliations are accurately performed, appropriately documented and reviewed and approved. Basically reconciling the items as accurately as possible, identify them promptly and thoroughly with them being investigated and implemented and documented. We consider this, we've continued to do the work that we did to get this moved to partially corrected. We've again strengthened our banking reconciliation policy, and that will be demonstrated in the upcoming audit as some of those bank reconciliations are going to have to be cleared. As performed by our accounting services, and then reviewed and approved by our finance director. So we continue to strengthen our policies and procedures regarding this matter and consider it fully corrected. And I think that the audits will demonstrate that as well. Any questions pertaining to this item? Finding 23 is electronic funds transfer. They deemed this from our previous submission, they deemed this partially corrected. And the state continued to recommend that the enhanced controls to ensure that the city records and documents the individuals who initiate, review, and approve EFTs to establish responsibilities for the EFT and evidence that the individuals were appropriately separated from the duties of preparing bank reconciliations and journal entries. Now, just by way of background, this was a major concern of mine coming in as your interim city manager, given that we had a contracting entity that was our finance department, and also our internal auditing team. So you have a challenge. I have a challenge, and the city has a challenge where you have the same person doing the work and then checking their own work. There is an inherent conflict there and inherent challenges there, which is why I quickly wanted to move from such a system. We now have a documented record of all electronic funds transfer, EFTs, those are wires and internal transactions. This dated form provides justification of the fund transfer with supporting documentation as well. These executed forms are provided to my office, the city manager's office, on a monthly basis for my review. And in view of these actions, this finding is deemed to be corrected. If there's no questions pertaining to this item, we'll move to finding number 27, administrative building purchase. Given our response, they deemed this partially corrected and continue to recommend that the city should enhance efforts to take prompt and appropriate action to lease vacant Town Center 1 office space to maximize rental revenue. We've now moved the commission chambers to the 3rd floor. We're moving the police department to the 1st floor along with our building and license department, and we've leased out an entire floor. So we are almost to 100% utilization, and we deem this finding to be corrected. In addition,
Mr. Mayor,
Commissioner Kelly.
thank you. Under this finding, so with the building at capacity almost, so we're almost 100% capacity here internally for just city, or what's the percentage that's outside?
of the about outside is 25%, and the city occupies about 75% of the building.
So what that means, we're still going to be, I don't like to use the word subsidizing, but that means we're still going to be covering the majority of cost as we've had to do the city had to do in the past years, or are we, how are we doing it? How are we making that adjustment?
Yes. With the city occupying 75% of the building, obviously then the 25% that's currently leased out does not cover the total operation. So the city will be subsidizing that. We've also taken the additional efforts of working with the city attorney's office to turn this into a condo unit so that we don't have to pay taxes on the spaces that we use, which should net us another savings of about $100,000 per year.
So we're looking to do that, or we've done that?
We've done that.
So right now we're just subsidizing how much?
25%. 25% is leased out for commercial purposes.
Okay, I'll stick a pin there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, all right. Moving on to finding number 28, construction administration. After we responded, they considered this finding partially corrected and continue to recommend that we extend efforts to timely pay contractors to avoid construction project delays. We deem this finding corrected. We have a series of policies, procedures, and processes in place now to timely pay our contractors, all of our vendors and contractors, not just for construction purposes, which has been a challenge for cities in the challenge for the city in the past. This is even while we're still under state financial oversight. And with the current processes, including financial oversight from the state, the city can release a check from receipt of an invoice in less than 30 days. We now consider this in view of the state's ability to make payment in less time than is authorized under the state's prompt payment statute. We consider this finding to be corrected. Any questions to finding number 28?
Mr. Mayor?
Commissioner.
I think all of us went down.
I think we're all just tired. My question is, are you saying that we do not have any outstanding bills as it relates to contractors?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Kelly?
Okay, so basically we're paying all of our vendors within that 30-day turnaround of receiving invoice.
That's our goal. Sometimes there are hiccups. Bills have to be sent back because a vendor might have submitted an invoice appropriately or gave us all the information that we need, but that is not the norm, that's the exception.
Well, but if we got according to this, you got the operating procedures now that you're using for visibility and streamline the process and all that good wording. How much of a challenge is it still in our city? We institute these new policies, because I still hear folks saying they can't get paid on time or they don't get paid on time. So based on what I'm seeing here, we're actually less than what's authorized by the state. We're under that. So, okay. Other than some kind of challenge with the invoice itself, basically you're saying people get paid.
Absolutely.
Okay, is that based on when we get the invoice or based on when we get the product?
Based on when we receive the invoice.
Okay, well, let me ask this question. I apologize, Mr. Mayor, but it's been bothering me for a while. Where's the invoice or policy or whatever on the shirts and the business cards? Because we've been waiting over 4 months and we haven't got any of them yet. So we paid the folks and we haven't got it, or what's going on with that? You can give it to us in an email later, because when I see this, if it's not an invoice issue, and we got money to pay them, I'm concerned that we're still having to wait that long to get simple things like that. So you can provide that to us in an email since it's corrected now, going forward. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Manager?
Yes, the assistant city manager, I believe, had been addressing some of that issue with the clerk's office, so I'll have her respond.
With regards to the business cards and shirts, there's been some back and forth with the executive secretary and our receptionist. So I can forward those emails if the commission would like me to do so, but there definitely has been some back and forth.
Mr. Mayor?
You know what? I don't want to spend time
Yeah,
on
'cause
going back and forth to
Not
this.
on this.
Okay, because regardless of going back and forth, it's 4 months since November. And still, I'm in the community, my colleagues in the community, some of them without cards and or any representation of a shirt. And so we got money to pay. If it's issues, invoice, whatever, Mr. Mayor, I won't take more time on it. Staff needs to just deal with it, get it done. No excuses.
Thank you, Commissioner Kelly. I've yet to see an invoice for this item. And I've cleared out all of our invoices just today, so there are no pending invoices. I will direct staff to work with the clerk's office to get an invoice so that this can be paid. Moving on to finding number 28, construction administration. After our submission, they consider this item to be, oh, okay. So are there any other additional questions on construction administration? Okay, moving on to finding number 29, land disposals. After our response, the state considered this partially corrected and stated the city should follow its established land disposal policies and procedures. And we are doing so and have implemented policy procedures prevent future administrations from violating land disposal policies. In our transactions. We've declared items surplus land parcels for sale as per our policies and procedures and advertise them to the public. In view of the city currently adhering to this recommendation and finding, we consider this deemed corrected. Any questions pertaining to finding 29? Moving on to finding 34, motor vehicle fuel inventory. The state, upon our response, consider this now corrected. We implemented, they recommended that we reopen our fuel pumping station. We have declined to do so, but we've implemented other things that causes us to be able to audit and recommend our fuel uses, such as our Wexix cards. So this is now deemed by the state fully corrected. Any questions pertaining to this item? Moving on to finding number 37, that.
Hold on, Mr. Manager.
Yes.
Commissioner Kelly?
If you could provide, I'm quite sure, my colleagues, they've been here longer. You could provide in writing that process of how the fuel cards work with each employee, how they're issued, et cetera. I'd appreciate it because that's something new. I'd like to know how that works. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
No problem. Mr. Manager, go ahead.
Absolutely. We'll submit that to the entire commission by the end of the week. Fuel policy. Okay, email. Finding 37, debt management policy. They continue to see this as not corrected and again recommended that the city establish debt management policies and procedures that are consistent with GFO best practice in the city ordinances. This is a finding I really believe that they want to see us implement this, the GFOA policies and procedures, which is just basically best practices for government accounting and finance implemented in our resolution and charter. Because we have developed the policies for debt management and continue to do so. We've hired our first procurement officer in 8 years. He's been helping facilitate this process of cleaning up our debt and putting some policies in place to prevent us from violating those procedures. In view of this policy now existing, we deem this policy to be corrected and will demonstrate to the state that we will be bringing resolutions to get it codified as law by the administration, by the commission. Any questions pertaining to this finding?
Mr. Mayor,
Commissioner Kelly?
thank you. With regard to all of these that I keep seeing that are policy that have now been established, were they policies that were done administratively, didn't require coming back to the commission, they're just done internally? Is that how most of these were done, where I keep seeing policies that were established?
That's correct, but all policies and procedures are coming to the commission for approval.
Well, it says that the city, also it's already came to the city.
Not yet. We will be bringing, as per the past, just recent commission meeting, we'll be bringing all policies and procedures for the
So all
entire
of these
city.
that we're seeing that's saying corrected, you got to bring those to the commission for approval.
Correct.
Okay.
No problem.
Okay.
Mr. Manager?
Finding 38, selection of bond professionals. We have no occasion to correct this. We have not had issued another bond. That may be an issue that will be coming up under the current administration, as that's something that we're looking to do to better situate the city financially. However, we've had no occasion to correct, but moving forward, we absolutely would obtain a bond professional to assist the city with navigating the implementation or of a bond. And so we've had no occasion to correct this, but we do deem this to be corrected. Any questions pertaining to finding 38? Moving on to finding 39, which is cash collections. Upon our response, the state considers this partially corrected, but continue to recommend that the city enhance controls over cash collections to ensure that pre-numbered receipts are used in consecutive order for all non-utility cash collections at all city cash collection points. Now, I consider this doubly corrected. First, because we have implemented policies and procedures that are in occurrence with GFOA best practices, but we are moving also within the next 90 days, moving to a cashless system in our collections department. So I consider this one doubly corrected. Any questions pertaining to cash collections finding? Fantastic. Moving on to finding 47, background screening. Given our response, this was deemed partially corrected. City records did indicate that there were 10 volunteers and vendor employees receive appropriate background screenings. So to the credit of Mrs. Ray of our Parks Recreation Department, for all of her volunteers, she has implemented a policy and procedure under her leadership that all of the volunteers receive background screenings. That was a conversation that she and I had back in October, and she executed on it immediately. So all of our volunteers have received background screening. That is a industry standard, particularly and requirement that volunteers receive background screenings, particularly if they're going to be dealing with what are deemed to be vulnerable populations, which is children, the elderly, or disabled. City records demonstrate that the city has conducted these background screenings for all volunteers since that time, and on this basis, we deem this finding to be corrected. Any questions pertaining to finding 47?
Mr. Manager, I'm
Yes.
sorry, through the mayor. I'm
Commissioner
just a
Evans.
little bit perplexed because of the last meeting we had, and we had a resolution as it relates to volunteers in the city and not necessarily having a background check. But I'm reading this, you're saying that the state says that we ought to have background checks on our volunteers, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
And that particular resolution, Commissioner Bass, actually provides me with the authority to come up with the final policy. So of course, I will be bringing back a policy back to the commission that does require background checks. Moving on to finding 50, mayor and city commissioner compensation and expense reimbursements. Given our response, they now deem this partially corrected and continue to make these recommendations that the city, which we've already done and has been done on previous administration, discontinue providing automobiles to the mayor and city commission. So that had already been done, but we also addressed future reimbursement payments to the mayor and city commissions, requiring the mayor and city commissioners to provide prior to payment documentation detailing the nature and purpose for the expenses for which they are seeking reimbursements. So we have policies and procedures that address that now. And consult with the IRS to determine the extent to which the value of any personal usage of automobiles and payments made to the mayor and city commission should have been reported as earnings to the IRS. You all are aware that we have these policies in place as you are following them, and that you're also no longer provided with vehicles. So this is a matter of us just opening up our books and showing them the supporting documentation detailing the nature and purpose of your expenditures. And the city will present to the mayor and commission a determination that the city will not consult with the IRS regarding reporting past personal usage of city vehicles as earnings of the mayor and city commission. That's the position that the administration is taking. And with these actions, this finding is now deemed to be corrected. Any questions regarding to finding 50, mayor and city commissioner compensation and expense reimbursements? Fantastic. Moving on to finding 52, very, very excited about being able to address finding 52. They deemed finding 52 not corrected, which is the city pay plan. But we have been working diligently, Assistant City Manager Shameka Lawson and our Ms. Levers and our Human Resources Department, Mr. Anathan and our Budget Administration and myself have put in extensive work on providing the city with an updated pay plan. We will be presenting that to the commission for approval within the next 30 days. And the plan will be monitored by the Human Resources Department to ensure that all personnel actions are consistent with the plan. The plan will be submitted, as I said, by no later than within the next 30 days, which is actually scheduled for April 12th commission meeting yes, the 26th. For your approval and the
Mr.
city.
Manager, one second, Commissioner Kelly.
I don't know, my mic maybe just low. I don't know. It's low? Oh, okay, well, I apologize. I'm trying to get the attention. With regard to the pay plan and presentation, where are we on the HR position? Have we filled it yet?
No, the HR position has not been, the HR director position has not been filled yet.
Okay, well, I guess you can provide all, can you get an update on, because I know that's been an issue as well with the finance on what's going on. I think it was mentioned at one of the previous meeting that there were a few candidates and some dropped out and there was still a couple. So I'm just wondering where it is, so you can let us know.
Yes, so to provide you an update on that, Commissioner Kelly, we started at ground zero again. We now are back up to 5 candidates that we are hoping to bring in for interviews next week. Okay, Friday, thank you very much. Okay, I didn't see it on my calendar. So this Friday, we hope to be interviewing those 5 candidates. That will be on my calendar, and I can hopefully make a selection. We hopefully can make a selection or at least an offer next week.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
No problem, Mr. Manager.
Okay. If there's no questions on the city pay, any further questions on the city pay plan, moving to finding 55, employee performance review. I am very, very excited to say under my administration that this is something that's been corrected. Performance reviews has been a deficiency of the city for a very, very long time. In fact, having employees that have been here for 10 and 14 years that never having had a performance review. Our current, as of effective of June of 2022 of last year, all city employees received a performance evaluation. The Human Resources Department has put in measures in place to ensure all employees receive an evaluation at the appropriate time. As city manager, my office has it as an evaluation criteria for all directors to ensure that they are evaluated on whether or not their employees have received performance evaluations. The city will continue to conduct employee performance evaluations. We did 2 last year. We're looking to do 2 again this year and hoping to move to 3 next year. So we now deem this finding to be fully corrected. Any questions pertaining to employee performance reviews? Moving to finding 58, authorization of overtime. Given our response, the state deemed this partially corrected and listed several instances where they felt that overtime was not properly approved by my office and recommended that the city continue to enhance its policies and procedures to ensure overtime is properly authorized in advance and adequate documentation is maintained, demonstrating the need for an appropriateness of overtime paid. So myself and Mr. Anathan spent extensive time putting together a policy procedure to address this. All overtime forms are being submitted to the payroll clerk now. Upon receipt, the information printed on the forms are reviewed for accuracy and approval by the department, then subsequently forwarded to the city manager, my office, for approval. The payroll clerk is not authorized anymore to pay overtime if the forms are not fully approved as before. And the city will continue to ensure overtime is properly authorized in advance and adequate documentation is maintained. The above procedures are designed to ensure that the necessary pre-approvals are received for overtime work deemed to be necessary by department directors, and that overtime payment is made properly in accordance with union contracts and other governing documents. On the basis of these actions, we deem this finding to be fully corrected. Any questions pertaining to the authorization of overtime? Fantastic. Moving on to finding 60, medical insurance premium payments, which has been As detailed earlier, a challenge when we've missed payments or had delayed payments and has impacted the health of our workforce. This was deemed partially corrected, and they recommended to properly demonstrate and ensure compliance with state law that we continue to recommend that the city document dates, vendor invoices are received, and in addition, that the city should continue efforts to ensure that insurance providers are timely paid. Insurance invoices now don't require state approval to be paid, so that enables my office to meet the 45-day target for payment well in advance. So we deem this the city currently utilizes this process, ensuring the city remains in compliance by date stamping invoices upon receipt and processing payment expeditiously to ensure all insurance providers are paid timely. On the basis of the above actions, this finding is deemed to be corrected. Any questions to the payment of medical insurance premiums? Hearing none, moving on to finding 62, employee leave payments. Now, this is a finding that is deemed to be partially corrected with some strong recommendations that we will be bringing back to the commission for their consideration. The ones that we agree upon is that we agree that the city needs to establish, and we have established policies and procedures to ensure payouts to employees for annual leave hours are made in accordance with city regulations. We now have a uniform policy across the city. The same payout policy that's in the ASME contract is the same payout policy that's in the PBA union contract, and is the same policy that the city has for its employees that are non-union employees. So that we now have a uniform, so there's less instances for mistakes now that we have a uniform policy. The issue is the records disclosed that 13 payouts totaling about $40,000 to 12 employees for annual leave during the period of October 2019 through February 2021 exceeded the maximum 50% of employee accrued hours in a given fiscal year, contrary to city regulations. Excess hours paid per employee range from 8 to 128 hours and totaled 704 hours, and the associated overpayments range from $200 to $5,230 and totaled nearly $20,000. So oftentimes what the state wants to see when there's been these overpayments is that either administration goes after that cash, or that they bring a resolution to the commission saying that we're not going to go after that cash. So I will be bringing those options to the commission for you to provide me direction on whether you deem it necessary that we go after that cash, or that's something that we're no longer going to pursue. Any questions pertaining to employee leave payments?
Mr. Mayor. Thank you. So, Mr. Manager, if I'm hearing you correctly, between you and the city attorney, you all feel like going after that, those funds would be counterproductive?
I think the city, I don't yet have an opinion on that. I think the city attorney and I should sit down and look at the date and time and circumstances and documentation of the payments. And then I would defer to, I provide her with my recommendation and thoughts and defer to the direction she wants to move in as a recommendation to the city commission.
Okay, but we're saying that it's corrected. So we're saying to the state, we are going to do something.
Yes, they either want to know two things in which we're telling them we are going to do these two things. They either want to know that the administration is going to go after the money, or that the commission is going to prove that we don't have to go after their money. So what I intend to do is provide a resolution for the commission with all the facts and details to provide us with some direction on which way to move.
Okay, well,
Yes, sir. Mr. Manager.
Right. Moving on, similar situation with terminal leave payouts, which is finding number 63. They continue for the same reasons to see this as partially corrected and continue to recommend that the city ensure that future terminal leave payments are made in accordance with city regulations and applicable collective bargaining agreements. They also recommend the city seek, and this is actually their recommendation, unlike the previous one with employee payments, employee leave payments. We paid out an excess of over about $40,000 to employees. Here we have excess of over $300,000 paid to 21 employees who separated from the city during this time period up to 2021. The 13 payments totaling $293,916 show that amounts paid for accumulated sick and personal leave were correct and that the terminated employees were qualified to receive those payments. However, six employees were paid for annual leave hours in excess of the limits allowed by city regulations and the applicable city collective bargaining agreements. Specifically, the six employees that were paid a total of $61,671 for 2,533 hours in excess of the maximum allowable hours. It is their recommendation that the city seek to recover the overpayments of just the $61,671 identified in that last statement. And it's also to recover the overpayments of $72,466 identified in a report number 2019 to 2021. I'll be presenting this to the commission for official approval of record. We do consider this corrected as we will be bringing the final decision to the commission. And then to ensure continued compliance with terminal leave payments, all payouts are prepared by the Human Resource Department, then submitted to the Budget Administrator for review, and then both myself and the Assistant City Manager, Ms. Lawson, review them again. And it makes it a lot easier again as we have uniform policies and procedures across the city. The payout policy that is in the PBA contract mirrors the payout policy that's in the ASME contract and is also reflected in the city's non-union employees policies. Any questions pertaining to terminal leave payouts? Hearing none, we'll move on to finding 69, which is untimely payments. This was deemed partially corrected, and the state continues to recommend that the city enhance procedures to require and ensure that all invoice receipt dates are documented and invoices are timely paid in accordance with Prompt Payment Act. We deem this corrected. The city has implemented a system to document the receipt of all invoices, their date stamped as I stated earlier, and proceed with processes leading to payment. It is the intent of the city to remit payments consistent with the Prompt Payment Act. On this basis, this finding is deemed to be corrected. Any questions pertaining to untimely payments? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to finding 70, which is expenditures without a documented public purpose. The state considers this finding to be partially corrected and recommends that the city should document its public records and authorize public purpose for the unrecovered fuel card question costs totaling $965 or take appropriate actions to recover those costs. The city has implemented the mandate of all expenditure requests to be accompanied by an approved invoice for goods and services, an approved requisition, and approved purchase order before disbursement. A further measure to avoid circumvention of this practice is that no employee shall be reimbursed for acquisitions on behalf of the city, legislation that just was recently passed. Based on this action, this finding is deemed to be corrected. Any questions pertaining to expenditures without documented public purpose? Hearing none, we move on to finding 71, which is credit cards. Now, this is deemed partially corrected for several reasons. They're looking at the requirement that individuals assign fuel cards, sign a user agreement. We're doing that now. Establish a monthly credit card limit for Q cards. We have that in place now. Require both card holders and the supervisors to be provided monthly summaries of fuel card charges. That's all online now. Supervisors can go online and look at the expenditures, and we recommend that they do fuel in each department for their vehicles, and limit fuel card usage exclusively to purchase fuel, which has also been done now. Our Wexex card would not allow anyone to go into a gas station and purchase a soda or purchase candy or purchase anything outside of just fuel. So having implemented all of those recommendations, we deem this finding to be fully corrected. Any questions?
Thank you. I guess the attorney, Madam Attorney, is it doable for us to, well, here's what I'd like. I'd like to get a quarterly report on the card usage, and since the recommendations have been made and how we're handling the card usage going forward, since it's all, I'm assuming it's all automated anyway. So it's just a matter of printing out a report. Is that fair assessment, Mr. Manager?
through the mayor, that would be a public record. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to get that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
No problem.
So for clarifications, what's the report that you want to receive, Commissioner Kelly?
Well, I'm just trying to track the gas and the card usage, because you have like 4 or 5 issues here that are related to the card usage, and I'm not that familiar with the process I asked earlier. So I'm just trying to get a gauge on how this works, because obviously it's something that's notated in the findings. And although it's a card, I'm not familiar with it, so I don't know, keep a track to see how that's working. Because part of what was recommended earlier was potentially going back to the fuel pump of gas, but since we're not going to do that, obviously, I'm assuming this is a better measure, so I just want to be able to track it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we will provide, as stated here as one of the corrections to the finding, we will provide Commissioner Kelly, as we can with all of you, a monthly fuel consumption report. Okay. Moving on to finding 73, competitive procurement of services. The state deems this partially corrected and continues to recommend the city enhance policies and procedures to ensure the competitive selection of services in accordance with city ordinances. A request for proposal has already been issued to solicit competitive proposals from vendors to provide insurance services. They took particular issue that the city secured a insurance contract, a rather costly and large insurance contract without going through any type of competitive bidding or procurement process. So that was the main point of their discussion when it came to competitive procurement of services. So we have attacked and addressed that directly, including by having you all approve a RFP that allows us to actually have someone whose position is to go out and compete for better contracts, insurance contracts for us. The city has hired a procurement officer in January of 2023, our first in 8 years, who's created a shared procurement drive to capture all communications about all bids released to the public by the city. It will house all bid forms, preparation documents, evaluation instructions, and scoring outcomes. Based on these actions, this finding is deemed to be corrected. Any questions pertaining to competitive procurement of services? Hearing none, we move on to finding number 76, which is 5-year financial recovery plan consultants. Again, this will be, they're looking at overpayments that have been made. This administration will be bringing resolutions to the commission to provide us guidance on whether we should recoup those funds or not. They state that the city has taken no action to seek repayment of or obtain additional documentation to justify what was indicated as a $14,500 overpayment to a consultant who was developing a 5-year financial recovery plan. It is the recommendation of the state that the city's management make a determination to pursue collection of these amounts or bring a resolution to the city commission to have them defer seeking payment. So we considering that we're going to do that, we deem this finding to be corrected and open the floor to any questions if there are any pertaining to recovery of overpayment for a 5-year recovery plan. Moving on to finding number 77, auditor selection and auditor services contract. They deemed this to be partially corrected. The city audit committee should select auditors in accordance with state law and city resolution. Pretty forward statement. The city believes that this is fully complies with state laws, particularly with resolution number 20-9778, establishing an audit committee. However, it will replace the audit committee with an auditor selection committee as quotes unquotes. The city currently utilizes an audit committee that met to select the audit firm. Other than erroneously using an evaluation committee, now corrected, this finding we believe is fully corrected. So it was kind of from our perspective, not to minimize this finding, they say tomato, and we say tomato. Any questions pertaining to this finding? Hearing none, we move over to finding number 80, wireless communication devices and services. This is deemed partially corrected. There were a host of issues here regarding the maintenance of a detailed master list of all city-owned mobile devices and the individuals they are assigned to, performing a documented comparison of devices per the master list devices shown on billing statements, and monitoring call usage and report non-business use and high usage of data or talk time to the applicable department head or their designee. It is the recommendation of the state that the city maintain sufficient documentation to evidence the results of the monthly comparison of devices on the master list of devices shown on billing statements. We deem this one corrected. I say we deem because this is probably one of the only ones where it's going to be a wait and see. Hopefully they agree. Here are the things that we've implemented. The city maintains, we do now maintain a master list of the assignment of all city mobile devices. Work in progress. The city's mobile communications service provider provides the ability to run reports on services and devices from any point in time. We hope that meets the requirement. Available reports include billed analytics, unbilled usage summary, and inventory, which our IT department can access at any time. The city's mobile communications service provider also provides the ability to monitor high usage. Monthly reports are run to address this issue. So that's what we've done. We've extensively to keep this corrected, and hopefully the state will agree with us. Any questions pertaining to wireless communication devices and services? All right, hearing none, we move to finding number 82, which is City Commission minutes. They deemed this finding not to be corrected and recommended that the city ensure that minutes for all City Commission meetings are timely approved and posted to the city website. We now deem this to be corrected. The city clerk's office is ensuring that all minutes are approved by the City Commission and posted on the city's website within the time stipulated by the city charter. Additionally, on June 8th, 2022, the city clerk's office instituted a new portal for commission meetings that tracks commission votes so that the public can be informed of the actions taken by the City Commission prior to meeting minutes being approved. We now deem, with all the steps that the clerk's office has made, we now deem this fully corrected. Any questions pertaining to the City Commission minutes? Hearing none, we move on to finding 83, which is financial disclosures. This was deemed partially corrected due to some of the challenges faced by the city clerk's office. She can request financial disclosures, but she cannot and warn that you will be fined if you do not turn in a financial disclosure. Certain personnel, as you know, are supposed to turn in financial disclosures to her office on annual basis. We now have tightened up a strong policy and procedure where that is now part of the evaluation criteria and subject to progressive disciplinary action if a personnel that's required to submit financial disclosures to the clerk's office fails to do so in a timely fashion. We now deem this finding corrected. Any questions pertaining to financial disclosures? Hearing none, we move on to finding number 84, lobbyist registration. This is also was deemed partially corrected, and a recommendation from the state that city personnel should establish a payroll code or otherwise separately identify registration expenditures to ensure that lobbyist registration fee revenue is only expended to administer the applicable provisions. The city clerk's office met with my office and our finance department. We've come up with a strong policy and procedures that we believe will cover this finding by establishing an accounting of received lobbyist registration fees at least annually, and remedy those receipts against city clerk's administrative costs. Having taken this action, we deem this finding to be corrected. Any questions pertaining to lobbyist registration? All right. The next final findings here are pertaining to CRA plan adoption. This was deemed not to be corrected, and they recommended that the CRA should amend the CRA plan to include detailed descriptions of proposed redevelopment projects, estimated project costs, timeframes for completing projects, and a certain date for completing all redevelopment projects, and to correctly modify the CRA's 20-year existence period. Additionally, they recommend the CR should ensure that the future modifications of the CR plan are publicly noticed and include all required information. We now deem this finding to be corrected. The CRA voted to approve a budget allocation of $100,000 in its fiscal year 2022-2023 For the update of the OCRA plan, the Okra will conduct a strategic planning workshop, as you all know, which you've agreed to do in June 2023, to review the current CRA plan and provide updates such as proposed project budgets and timelines to ensure timely completion of projects and responsible spending of TIF funds. We now deem this finding to be fully corrected. The only potential thing that they could possibly ding us on is proposed redevelopment projects, which we are quickly implementing on and believe that we'll have some dirt in the ground, shovels in the ground rather shortly here. Any questions pertaining to CRA plan adoption? Moving forward to finding 87, annual report of activities. They deemed this partially corrected, stating that the CRA should continue efforts to ensure that the required annual report of activities are timely completed and submitted to the city and the county, and the CRA should retain records evidencing the submittal of the reports. We absolutely deem this finding to be fully corrected. The fiscal year 2022 annual report of activities was submitted to the city and the county on time within the prescribed period. Records of submittal of these reports are now being maintained. The CRA is now in compliance with the recommendation of this finding, and again, we deem this to be fully corrected. Any questions pertaining to the finding of annual reports of activities? All right. Hearing none, we move to finding 88, CRA annual audit. They deemed this partially corrected, stating the CRA should ensure that timely annual audits of the CRA are conducted in accordance with state law and the interlocal agreement. In addition, the CRA should retain records evidencing the submittal of the audit reports. The CRA's annual audit submission plan mirrors that of the city, which we've gotten state approval for. We will be up to date by the end of this year. We're working with the Markham team. We have the Brunson team also internally, Markham externally. We are putting out more audits and doing more financial review and statements in the history of the existence of the CRA and the city. And with all of these actions in place, the CRA will be in full compliance with the recommendation of this finding. So we now deem this to be corrected. Any questions pertaining to CRA annual audits? Hearing none, we move forward to finding 89, which is CRA's tax increment financing. The state deems this partially corrected, stating that the city should immediately pay the CRA the past due required TIF contributions. In addition, the city should ensure, in accordance with state law, that future required annual contributions of TIF revenues are promptly made to the CRA. This was very important for us to fix. If the city owes the CRA money, it needs to be delivered. It needs to be delivered on a timely basis. What we saw here is the current executive director, Mr. Delane, met with myself and our finance department and our budget department, and we looked at the current policies and procedures in place, which was just pretty much, there wasn't any. So we decided that we will know in advance how much money, based because it's a percentage of our tax dollars. So we should know in advance when we get the preliminary reports about how much money we owe the city. We can share that with the CRA executive director, and we policies in place that we will. When that is public and is published, the CRA will then invoice the city, stating that these are the TIF dollars that you owe me, and we'll have 30 days to make that payment. So with that process in place, we don't ever see the city not timely paying its TIF payments to the CRA. And we deem this, and with these appropriate procedures in place, we deem this to be fully corrected.
Mr. Mayor,
Commissioner Kelly?
in the status, the CRA approved for RFP for bookkeeping services back in September of last year.
That's correct.
Okay. I didn't get here in November, okay. I'll follow with the CRA on that side. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I forgot. You got the CRA director here. That's really to the manager, not to the CRA person, not to the manager.
Oh,
We get him to answer that question. I'll bring us up to speed on that.
I'm still looking at mechanical parking displays.
What happened? Y'all still got the mechanical?
That's what I'm looking, mechanical parking displays.
Oh,
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, Honorable Commission. Yes, the CR board actually voted to approve for an RP for bookkeeping services, essentially looking at how to properly manage our finances in tandem with the city as we're looking to clean up some of our financial items with the CRA. So this is something that the board did review as an opportunity to do, also looking at our audit findings and how best to remedy that finding.
So have they been hired?
That process has not commenced yet. We were actually going through the process of new legal. That information has been forwarded to our new legal team to review. And we'll be bringing it back to the board for their review because this is a process that wasn't initiated as of yet. And now that we have a new board with considering yourself, Vice Mayor Irvin, well, Board Member Irvin in this case, and a new vice chair, we want to give the new board an opportunity to review it before we put it back out on the street.
So is that, I guess the question I really had, is that a part of this finding being considered corrected?
That is correct.
You know what I'm saying? Having the bookkeeping in place, is that considered to be part of it being corrected, having it in place?
Having the process to bring in a group and then having them being on board is a condition of approval. So essentially, yes.
Essentially, yes.
Yes,
Okay. All right, thank you.
no problem.
Thank you, Mr. Manager.
Corian, just stay close because I see the rest of this is all CRA related. So just pop a squat right there on the front row there, because I think the rest of this is all CRA.
That's correct.
It is.
Moving on to finding 90 CRA financial transaction accountability. The state deemed this only partially corrected, stating that the CRA and the city should ensure that proper accountability is established for CRA financial transactions. In addition, CRA financial transactions should be properly authorized by the CRA board, recorded and reported. The city of Opa-locka has hired a finance director as part of a rebuilding of our finance department. She came on board in September 2022 and has worked with the OCRA in assisting in the reorganization of its finances. Mr. Anathan, our budget administrator, has also done extensive work to provide support to the CRA as well. In addition, the CRA has hired additional staff. They're now nearly fully staffed that will be able to self-process transactions through their administrative assistant, and they've begun to do so, and coordinate directly with the finance department and manager's office for timely processing of payments and record keeping of CRA finances through means of an invoice tracking system that has been implemented internally in conjunction with the finance department. As per the OCRA bylaws, section 4.3, purchasing goods and services, all financial transactions in excess of $5,000 must be approved by the OCRA board by resolution, ensuring that they are properly authorized, recorded, and reported. The OCRA board, OCRA board voted during the September 2022 CRA meeting to approve for an RFP for bookkeeping services to be released, seeking to have the selection process complete by July 2023. By following these procedures, the city now deems this finding to be fully corrected.
Okay, Commissioner Williams has her hand up.
Thank you. Thank you. I wanted to go back to the last conversation. I was a little confused. If the finding was to correct the accounting by hiring a bookkeeping service, or how is that finding corrected if we don't have a bookkeeping service right now? I mean, we passed the item, but we don't actually, it's not being implemented. So how do we say it's corrected? Wouldn't that be partial?
So Commissioner Williams, I'll take a stab of that. So we've been working with the Senior Auditor General Javier Alonso for about 9 months on this now. If we can demonstrate that we are taking the steps to do what we're saying we're going to do within a 90-day timeframe, or resolution or ordinance, we can deem this fully corrected. And they, in their processes of reviewing our submissions, by the time they get to that finding or reviewing that finding, it'll either be done or it won't be done. And they'll continue to say, this is still partially corrected, you need to move forward, or they will agree with us that this is fully corrected.
Mr. Manager, you said I'm sorry, Commissioner Williams, You said,
I think you're gonna ask my question. So go ahead, please.
go ahead,
Yeah, I'll
you do
put-
it, do it,
yeah.
you do it.
No, please, go ahead.
Explain that again. If it's in place within 90 days, then that means it's corrected.
So this is an ongoing process, right? So if we say that we're going to pass a resolution and we submit that in our documentation, because they're going to say, how are you going to correct this? We're going to pass a resolution to say that the commission will authorize us not to pursue this payment, right? When they receive, they can take 90 days to 6 months to review the work that we're doing and evaluating, did you do it or not? And during that time period, it will be revealed either you did it or you didn't do it. So that doesn't change the fact that we're saying this is what we're going to do to correct it, because you only have 30 days to respond. So obviously we could not have passed all of these resolutions and ordinances within 30 days, but we can demonstrate to them. And in fact, I hope through a special commission meeting, at least for that example, that we'll be able to forward them the resolutions that have been passed or the ordinances first reading, so forth and so on. So it's not a concrete finite process. It's a conversation back and forth, sometimes on a daily basis.
Nope, that's not what you said.
Brunson?
No, it was, I'm sorry, it had like a Hispanic name to it. You just said it like right now. No? Okay, maybe it was just me. Maybe I heard, it sounded like you said that there was a firm we had been working with for 90 days,
9 months. That was
9 months.
the state senior auditor. His name is Javier Alonso.
Oh, okay. Well, I thought you said firm. So what I said, okay. So the state senator auditor, so was the city working with the auditor, or was that the CRA working with the auditor?
Both.
So it was in tandem together.
Correct. As you can see, they do not separate. It's all 99 findings. 15 of those are the CRA. So they look at the city and the CRA together.
No, I know that part, but
Okay.
what I'm talking about is the bookkeeping section. So the
Okay.
last CRA meeting, we had a conversation about needing to hire a bookkeeper that needed to be separate from the city. But now you're saying they were in tandem, they work together. So is that something that we can do together or we can't do together? Because I'm a little confused. I don't
Okay.
know if that's a Corian Delane question.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. I
Um,
shall step away from the mic.
Oh, I don't know. I'm just trying to figure, because he's the one, you weren't there, Mr. Manager. It was Mr. Delane, and he's the one that kind of told us that we had to separate. So I'm just a little confused.
through the mayor, Commissioner Williams. So what was discussed on the dais during that meeting is looking at an opportunity to separate the functions of our finances. And that is why we released the RFP, or look to put together the RFP. However, we can work with the city, but in order to streamline our processes, we were looking at an opportunity to do with a bookkeeper to make sure that we're consistent with our reporting of our financial items. That's why we looked at doing the RFP process for bookkeeping.
So we passed to do a RFP. We haven't put the RFP out yet, but we're saying it's the finding is corrected.
That is correct. The process to make sure that we answer the finding is correct.
So that gives me pause. Because the process to get it done and not getting it done, to me, the getting it done is the correction, not just the process. But that's me. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
No problem, Commissioner Williams. Anyone else? Mr. Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moving on to tax and revenue finances. I believe we're at finding 91. CRA, CRA administrative expenses and fees. The state considers this now partially corrected but makes the recommendation that the CRA should seek and follow guidance from the county to remedy the excessive CRA administrative costs of $53,810 for the 2017-2018 fiscal year. Okra staff has engaged with Miami-Dade County Office of Management and Budget, which oversees the Opa-locka CRA in regards to the $50,810 in administrative expense overages from fiscal year 2017-2018 to ensure that the administrative expense identified by the state auditors is consistent with the definition of administrative expense intended by the county in establishing the CRA. Staff will be submitting documentation of correspondence with the county to close out this item, and by taking this action deems it to be corrected. Any questions pertaining to the CRA administrative expense and fees? Hearing none, we move to finding 92, compliance with the Uniform Special District Accountability Act, FDEO filing and annual fee requirement. The state considers this to be partially corrected and recommends, to avoid further late payment penalties, that the CRA timely pay annual fees to the FDEO. This annual bill was being sent to another department. I believe it was our city attorney's office, and was forwarded and was never forwarded to staff in a time to pay this invoice within a prescribed period. Okra staff have corrected the contact information, with the executive director being the recipient of all correspondence moving forward from the DEO. And a separate Okra mailbox has also been established by previous CRA correspondence to receive Planning and Community Development Department and or CRA Attorney's Office. By implementing these processes, this finding is deemed to be corrected. Any questions pertaining to compliance with FDO filing? Hearing none, we move to finding number 93, CRA budgets. State considers to be partially corrected with the CRA stating the CRA should ensure the CRA board approved budgeted amounts are properly reported in the budgetary comparison schedule presented with the CRA audited financial reports. As you all are aware, this is something that has been very, very important to your board chairwoman and was implemented previously under the previous executive director's leadership, as it was so important to the staff. Utilizing the city's finance department, the city of Opa-locka has hired our finance director and also our budget administrator. Budget administrator also provides in the budgets with the CRA now on a timely and consistent basis, comparisons and analysis of year to date with versus actual. Having put these things in place, we now deem this finding corrected. Any questions pertaining to CRA budgets? Moving to finding 94, website transparency. The state deems this partially corrected, recommended the CRA should continue efforts to ensure the CRA webpage on the city's website includes all information required by state law. The CRA is currently updating the CRA webpage to provide the requested information and the required information. Also, CRA has created a new separate website during fiscal 2022 to provide clear and direct access to all information required by the state. The CRA is now in compliance with the recommendations for this finding. Any questions pertaining to CRA website transparency? Yeah. Yeah.
Does that mean that the information is going on the CRA's new website? I heard you say new, or is that the CRA's website that's combined with the city, or is it both?
So responding to CRA board chairwoman Janie and resident of Opa-locka, Janie Russell, it is going on the new website.
So the update that was done recently, is that on the new website?
Actually, right now, we are updating a new website, but the current web page that is active right now has the updates. So we're working in tandem to do both.
Moving on, if there's no further questions pertaining to CRA website transparency, we'll move to finding number 95, CRA board member terms. State considers this to not be corrected and recommends that the CRA Board, in consultation with the County Board of County Commissioners, amend its bylaws to clarify terms of Board of County Commissioner appointed CRA board members. The CRA has engaged with the Miami-Dade County Board of County Commissioners to amend bylaws for terms of BCC appointed CRA board members. At current, appointed board members are to serve under the terms of the commissioners in which have appointed the city members. Upon the election of a new commissioner, the appointed member would no longer be a member unless reappointed by the new commissioner. An update is to be provided by May 2023, and by implementing this policies and procedures, we deem this finding to be corrected. Any questions pertaining to CRA board member terms? Hearing none, we move over to finding number 7, which is adherence to the Sunshine Law by the CRA. The state considers this partially corrected with the submission that we provided earlier. However, they continue to recommend that the CRA execute efforts to ensure that minutes for all CRA board meetings are promptly approved and made available for public inspection. CRA staff are currently utilizing a stenographer service to provide updated minutes from previous minutes that were missing. Staff are expected to be caught up with all previous meeting minutes by August 2023 and have all minutes posted on the CRA website, at which time the CRA will be in full compliance with the recommendation for this finding. By taking this action, the finding is deemed to be corrected. Any questions regarding CRA adherence to the Sunshine Law by the publication of its minutes? Hearing none, we move to finding 97, which is the CRA employment process. There's actually been no occasion to correct this, or perhaps, and that's in the time period that followed October 2019 through February 2022. But the issue was how the CRA hired its staff. CRA is currently preparing a hiring process for a full-time executive director. A draft job description for the executive director has been created and will be revised and implemented in the hiring process. The position is to be advertised by August 2023. The CRA has also hired 2 other employees using the recommended processes in the 2019 audit, which included posting a position, deploying a panel, having interviews, making recommendations, and extending an offer. Taking all of these actions, the CRA is in full compliance with the recommendations provided in the fiscal 2019 audit. Any questions to the CRA employment process? Hearing none, we move to finding 99. Legal services procurement and contract monitoring. It is recommended by the state that the CRA board revise the bylaws to require, 1, the use of a documented competitive selection process for procuring legal and other contractual services, the use of written contracts for the legal and other contractual services, ensure that such contracts include severance pay and other provisions that are consistent with good business practices and state law. In addition, it is recommended by the state that the city's management decision make the decision not to pursue a refund for the overcharges for legal services noted in the prior audit report, number 2019-221, be presented to the CRA board for official approval of record. So this is again one of those situations where if we're not going to pursue recovery of overpayments, that be approved by the board, as it must be done in the city. During the September 2022 CRA meeting, staff presented an RFP process for the selection of CRA legal services to implement a process for selection, which is pursuant to the CRA adopted City of Opa-locka Code of Ordinances, Article 4, Division 1, Purchasing. The CRA from its creation adopted the city's procurement process to streamline the procurement of services. At this time, CRA staff is drafting and will present a standalone policy and procedure for the agency, which will govern such policies and processes for the CRA moving forward. The policies and procedures guidebook will be presented to the CRA Board of Review by July 2023. Additionally, staff will prepare a resolution to be presented to the CRA board to approve the decision not to seek the return of overpayment in regard to prior legal services. By taking these actions, this finding is deemed to be corrected. Any questions pertaining to CRA legal services, procurement, and contracting? Hearing none, that is the conclusion of the partially corrected findings. And if there are, let me see. Okay. We have the not corrected findings and we have no occasion to correct, which we can do outside of this forum. And I will request the will of the commission to, if you want me to go through the additional partially corrected, which we feel will still be partially corrected.
Okay, you said. What? Cause you already know my vote, so. But you said one was partially corrected and the other
So
one.
all the ones that I presented were the ones that the state said these are partially corrected and we've taken action to deem them fully corrected. The rest are either no occasion to correct, have been corrected, or there's a group that we've done some additional work, but we deem that they're still going to be considered partially corrected.
And that's the no occasion to correct.
That's the they're currently partially corrected and we think they're going to remain partially corrected.
Okay, the colleagues,
It's the items in the second, behind the second tab. But I feel strongly that the items in the third tab and the fourth tab, that the commission would have no questions just reviewing those on their own.
Mr. Mayor,
Commissioner Kelly.
while you are looking through your tabs to make a decision, I just want to be very clear that these items that we're deeming correct, that we're going to submit as corrected, require many of them require some kind of action on the part of the commission. So I heard the manager say he's going to be asking for a meeting as he brings them forward for commission approval. But I don't want them to come in such a way that we are going to just be having the rubber stamp. So I want to put that on the record in advance, however they're going to come. Because we're viewing them where he's deeming them corrected based on the response that they're going to send to the state, to the auditor. But many of them require legislation that this commission has to pass. And while some of them are kind of more formal, just kind of probably won't require much dialogue, some of them are. So I want to make sure as they come up that that's notated as well as we make these decisions going forward. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. From my understanding, you said that you're gonna do a special meeting for these.
Yes, that's the intention of the administration.
To bring all of the findings, the resolutions for these findings in a special meeting.
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Bass has a question.
When are you anticipating having that meeting?
We're looking at some dates within the next 3 weeks.
Okay,
Yes. There are items that the CRA board needs to give directions to the executive director as the same. Do you want to pursue these overpayments or not?
to Commissioner Kelly's point, but on what I'm asking, can you give them to us in a list, what needs to be done by resolution legislation so that we are aware? So that
Absolutely.
we can research it and go through it prior to? Is
Absolutely.
that what you were?
Not only that, because some of them are policy, which
Yeah,
means they're
exactly.
going to be some detail. So I don't want to just get a resolution and then you got 6 or 7 pages of policy
Mhm.
that we got to pass in one night in a special meeting. Like I said, some of them are probably more formal, probably won't require maybe a minute or so, but some of them are going to require a little more detail. So we get it, in a timely manner.
If it be the will of the commission, Mr. Mayor, we can bring these items through the regular commission process.
It doesn't matter which process. I just
don't-
want to
it
be
don't matter
aware
either.
that some of them are going to take time. It doesn't matter which way you do a special meeting or bring them through the commission process, because you're going to submit this. I think you have to submit this by what, the 9th?
The 7th.
So you're going to submit these as our responses. So based on that, then we got, what was it, 90 days, 6 months, I heard 2 terms to make sure that we come into compliance with what we're saying is corrected. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
So you have a little time because he's submitting them on the 9th. I just don't want them all rushed because some of them being policy may take a little more detail in terms of looking at than some of the others. So you got time, whether he does it through the regular commission or special meeting, he can segue those out, as you said, that are going to be a little tougher so they can be addressed. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so but the question still remains whether or not the manager is going to continue with the
Partially
partially
corrected.
corrected. Commissioner Bass said, what'd you say?
If the results are gonna be the same as partially done, I think it would be like almost a waste of time. It would also give us time to go through it.
Absolutely.
Okay. And I'm in agreement with Commissioner Bass. The only thing is, like, I wanted to just explain it. So the second column is partially done. The third column is not corrected at all. And the fourth column is no occasion.
I'm
Go
trying to follow you, Mr. Mayor.
I'm seeing four sections.
Okay,
The first section that you went through was all of the ones that were corrected thus far.
yes,
Okay, so the second section is what we received before, which is is partially corrected and will remain partially corrected until
that's correct.
the 90 days, I guess.
That's correct.
Okay, and the third column is not corrected. Like, we haven't touched it at all. Is that what I'm looking at?
Correct.
All right, and then the fourth column is no occasion to correct. What do you mean by that? Just
Nope.
for the record.
So again, no occasion to correct is, say, for example, one of the findings was a land transaction. We haven't done another land transaction that we can demonstrate that we've corrected that system.
Okay, got it. All right. I said for the record, I just want him to say it. I think, so the will of the commission, are we moving on with this? Are we adjourning this meeting? What are we doing?
No, I think we can adjourn the meeting
Okay.
because even though we're saying corrected, they got to be submitted. There's got to be information put forward, so it doesn't need to go on any further than that. I think, like Commissioner Bass said, we can digest some of these other partial, what have you, and.
Okay. All right, so if our hearts and minds are clear, can I get a motion? Mr. Manager, we're good on your end?
We're
Everybody?
golden.
We're golden now. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Move
Moved by Commissioner Kelly, second by Vice Mayor. This meeting is adjourned.
This has been a